We also go out to organisations like schools and colleges. We're also working with the teachers' unions to draw up a training package for teachers so that teachers can understand the needs of intersex children. And that's going to be the cover of the new book that we're producing. So, how is it that I became interested in intersex conditions? What was it that attracted me to finally agree to accept the position of director of UCAL when I'm spending a lot of my time working at the university and also having children referred to me, children with mental health problems? Part of it is due to my commitment to children anyway, but also because I've been there, I've won the t-shirt. Like so many people, I was born intersex. I am male, I have a karyotype of XY, but my genitalia was underdeveloped when I was delivered. And my family were advised that my only hope for a normal life was to be surgically reassigned to female. So within a very short period of time, my external genitalia, such as it was removed, including an empty scrotum. And then 5 years later, I was admitted for exploratory surgery. I was told I was going to have my appendix removed, and I was taken into hospital. But the reason I was going into hospital was because they wanted to do exploratory surgery to discover my missing testes. And they only found one, so they settled for that. They removed that. They discovered later, actually, that I had a very, very tiny second testis, but that was in the future. The scar on my abdomen runs from there to there. It's the largest appendectomy scar I've ever seen. And I was raised as a girl. That was the advice. Raise the baby as a girl. You treat her as a girl, dress her as a girl, paint the nursery pink. She'll never know any different. She'll identify as a girl. Because John Money in America at the Johns Hopkins Hospital, he was born in New Zealand, by the way, but at Johns Hopkins, he was doing his research, and he came up with this wonderful theory that newborn babies are tabula rasa. They do not have a gender identity. It's up to you to train them to be male or female. Yes, it's a handy theory, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And John Money's so-called research has been shown up for the charade that it was. It's taken a long time. And one of the people that actually highlighted the inaccuracies in John Money's report, and by the way, he was a psychologist, he wasn't a physician, the person that actually highlighted the anomaly in his reports, he falsified his reports actually, which is an arch sin in academia. He published lies, but it was actually Professor Diamond that highlighted the falsehood of his report. And he was the one that actually uncovered the scandal and brought it to the fore. So that was one of the reasons why Professor Diamond was an inspiration. But it meant that this attitude that children, newborn children, are a tabula rasa that you just simply bring up according to what you want. You know, if you didn't want a boy, bring him up as a girl. Doesn't matter. You can have surgery. And everybody lives happily ever after. Well, they don't. Occasionally they do. Because remember, there are people, adults, who internally, in terms of their chromosomes, in terms of their external anatomy, look physically one particular sex. But they then transition later in life when they can. They have to jump through lots of hoops, but they transition, and these are trans people. So there are some people where maybe it turned out to be successful, but the vast majority of intersex people live very, very unhappy lives indeed. And I can remember And other people here can remember what it was like, thinking, I must be going mad. Either they're mad or I'm mad. I was given a girl's name. I went to a mixed school, but I had to do everything that girls were doing. I couldn't do what the boys were doing. And this went on and on and on. Finally, when it came time to go to secondary school, I told my mother I was going to run away, because I was not going to go to a bigger version of where I went in primary. So life became a battle. The life of a young person should be joy, happiness, play, falling in the mud, and just doing all sorts of crazy things and collecting things, dinky toys or whatever. No. I spent all my time really just talking to myself, because nobody else seemed to be listening to me apart from my mother. And she realised quite early on that a mistake had been made. And she said, I'm not going through this any longer. My mother, by the way, was a doctor. She was a psychiatrist. And she decided enough was enough, and she was going to back me to transition. And when I started to transition, I was told, we don't really have a process for you. Well, that's all right. If I'm the only person on God's earth that's like this, which I'm sure I'm not, can we put something together? Well, you're not trans. What's that got to do with it? It's like saying, well, you're not African, or you're not Dutch. I said, well, all right, but I'll start somewhere. I discovered later that there was lots of people in my situation. I wasn't the only one. So I had to actually jump through the same hoops as trans people. That's why I have a great deal of admiration for trans people. And in fact, they were a great help to me when I transitioned. And I began transition when I was 19 years old. And I was a medical student at the time. Everything seems to be going my way. I was a medical student. The intention was to become a surgeon, because I was going to put these poor babies back together. That was my idea. I'm going to counter what certain surgeons had done, certain neurologists had done. I didn't finish the course. No, I didn't drop out because I wasn't interested. I dropped out because my car dropped, nose first into a quarry. And this is where I ended up, and I thought, well, you can't sit down on the job to be a surgeon. So I was offered a place at the Hysteria Research Centre, which actually was founded here in Cambridge. And then they opened a much larger branch at the University of Manchester. And I was taken on there as a research associate. I worked at the Hysteria studying neurology and the effects of brain injury on cognitive development and behaviour. And that's what I'm doing now. So, that's it in a nutshell. I brought something else along, which other people can probably tell you more about than I can in a way. But over here, I've got some photographs. And these are photographs of a group of people whose lives and futures were destroyed, almost destroyed. These are all female athletes. The one at the very second from the end is Caster Semenya. You've all heard of Caster Semenya. The person who shouldn't have been allowed to compete in the Olympics because she's really a man. No, she's not. I'm waiting for them to tell Will Farrow that he can no longer run, because his ancestors came from the highlands of Kenya, and the people, because of the high altitude there, have a huge vital capacity in their lives. And this is why little Mo, who looks as if a strong wind was blowing over, can run like he runs, because he's got this tremendous vital capacity. His lungs are much bigger than his little body would suggest. And are they going to say to Mo, oh, my dead body, are they going to say to Mo, you can't compete in the Olympics anymore? Like they almost said to Caster Semenya. So, if you look at these afterwards, you'll see the names on them. There are many more, but this is just an example. And they're in chronological order, moving through these female athletes that dared to compete and they beat people. We can't have that, can we? I mean, they're actually beating the opposition. So they came up with the solution that these women weren't really women. They were pseudo-women. There was something about them that gave them an advantage. Yeah, they were bloody good at what they did. Right the way through to Caster Semenya, who was being treated like a lab rat. A young, sensitive woman from an South African village. And she's put into stirrups, as if she's about to give birth, while they poked around her vaginal opening. And the one on the end, that's me. That's me. I was a fencer. And I belonged to the Mallard School of Fencing, which is one of the oldest fencing schools in the country, in Canterbury, because we lived in Kent. And I was selected for the British team to fence. Why, I don't know, but they must have thought I was good. But I was selected for the team, and I was told I couldn't compete in international events. I could participate in events here, but I couldn't participate in international events. Why? Because my gonad's didn't match my birth certificate. Or my carrier type, anyway, the blood test. Because I used to have gonads. They knew that. And my carrier type, XY, didn't match my birth certificate. It's not my fault. So because there was this crossover, as there was for these other people, because there was the crossover, I was told I was banned from international competition. So I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that I could fence as well as they can run. But I was another example of an individual who was barred because I was born intersex. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Joe Holliday, who's going to tell you some more.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by talking about my own experiences. I was born with a rare condition known as cloacalextrophy, which meant that, among other aspects of the condition, I was born with no external genitalia. At birth, I was registered male and whisked off to a specialist hospital to begin surgery on repairing the other aspects of the medical condition, primarily the fact that the cloaca and the bladder were presented outside the body. For the first year, I was in and out of hospital and underwent lots of surgical procedures to fix different problems that kept occurring. But for that first year I was being raised as male, and that wasn't really an issue at the time. It wasn't until I was sent to another specialist hospital who were planning on the primary repair of my body. It was during a consultation with the surgeon there that they turned around to my parents and said, well, actually, we need to bring this child up as female. And when my parents asked why, they told them that, well, this child doesn't have a penis, so they can't write it male. They'll be depressed, they'll suffer from mental illness, and most likely kill themselves at some point. So with that fear behind them, my parents agreed that at the age of 1 I would be brought up as female. And that the year after that, I had my surgery to repair the condition. But also during the repair, they discovered that I had internal reproductive organs, and they told my parents that they weren't quite sure whether or not they were ovary or testes. They were not needed to shape, and that they would possibly, most likely, turn to cancer at some point. So it was probably best to remove the internal testes, ovaries. which of course my parents said, yeah, okay, they're going to be cancerous, we'll remove them, let's play it safe. So during one of the surgeries, they took out those internal organs. I was closed up, I had many different procedures done, and from the age of 1, grew up as female. One of the biggest issues we had when I was growing up early on was that my birth certificate was male. So we started a long legal battle to attempt to get it amended. However, after quite a few years, it wasn't really working. So we decided to approach the media, which led on to 2 years of quite intense media scrutiny, really having to fight the government, fight the medical professionals to say that actually this child is female, not male. And eventually, after quite a long fight, we got an amendment to the birth certificate when I was 11. After that died down, I was then starting to go into secondary school, which in the area that I lived was a all-girls school, which was quite confusing for me because I was being raised female. I was pretty sure in my head that I was female, but as a child I was never very feminine. I was the tomboy. I preferred to ride bikes and climb trees and play with toy guns and Barbies. And going into a very female environment was very confusing. And as time went on, I had to then deal with hormones, which were given to me in tablet form. I was pumped full of estrogen from the age of 10 onwards, and didn't really respond to me very well. And I didn't develop too feminine, but I kept on taking it. During my teenage years, I then had to deal with my sexuality. I always felt sexually attracted to females, so I assumed I was a lesbian. So I eventually had to go through the whole coming out and coming out with my parents and my friends and trying to find comfort in my sexuality and my identity. However, it never quite fit. I suffered in my teenage years with depression, isolation, anxiety, never wanting to mix with too many people. I left school early on and was homeschooled because of bullying, because of my psychological issues at the time. My mental health was quite bad. I was very depressed. And throughout my childhood, throughout my teenage years, I'd always put it down to my medical conditions. I was living with a colostomy, I was living with urinary issues, which is part and parcel of colpoextrophy. So I always assumed it must be something to do with that. And there was nothing I could do about it. Eventually I got into my 20s, and my depression got even worse. And for years I was severely depressed, bouts of self-harm, attempted suicides, and just couldn't quite figure out why. And again, I would blame my medical conditions because of this, that, and the other, because I'm not well. At the time, my mobility was not very good. I was having to use sticks to get around, primarily because by about the age of 20, I'd given up on the hormones. They weren't working for me. And that affected my bone density. But I just blamed my medical problems. In my mid-20s, well, just before my mid-20s, I decided to write a book about my experiences. And I started putting that together with the help of a friend. And during that process of going through my whole life, piece by piece, I had convinced myself that all my issues must be because of my medical condition. However, halfway through writing the book, I My mobility was getting so bad I had to go and see a hormone specialist. And it was really to go and see what sort of tablets I would need to be taking. But part and parcel of the consultation was they were going to do a chromosome test and just really check me out, see what was happening. I went back a few weeks later and they gave me the chromosome results, and it was XY, male. And I thought, okay, this is not information I'd had before. We didn't know what my chromosomes were when I was growing up. It might not make a difference, I'll just ignore that for now, but it sort of started to sink in over time. Eventually led to some more hospital appointments, one in which I was lucky enough to get hold of my medical records for about 2 hours. I snuck them down into the hospital cafe and was looking through them, not really quite sure what I was going to find. In it I found lots of letters from doctors to doctors about my chromosomes, about my internal genitalia, about my internal genitalia being testes. Right. The more I went through it, I eventually found the pathology report that they performed after they'd removed my internal reproductive organs. And the pathology report stated that what they had removed wasn't unhealthy or deformed. It was actually 2 perfectly functional testes that they'd removed. And that was the moment where I thought, well, actually, I was born male. And at the time, and it still is the case in many respects, cloacal extrophy and those born with variations of their sex characteristics are often subjected to the ideas of Dr. Money and the way he viewed sex and gender. And what had happened to me was that the doctors thought, well, it'd be easier surgically to bring them up as female. And as long as you put a dress on that child and you make them really pink, they'll grow up to feel female. But I never did. And over the course of a few months after finding that information out, it felt like all the confusion, all the issues, the depression, all those little tiny things throughout my childhood that never quite made sense. The reason I was a tomboy, the reason I didn't like to wear girly clothes. It all came clear that I was born male, and that was taken away from me when I was 1. And all that internal conflict that I'd had wasn't all to do with my medical condition. Obviously there was some aspects of that. But it was that I was living as someone that I wasn't, and had been for 25 years. So I, in the last few years, had to transition back, which has actually been surprisingly easy for me because it felt so right. It felt like everything fitted into place. I started taking male hormones and my body actually reacted to them far better than it ever reacted to the estrogen, because that's what my body was prepared for and just never was able to have naturally. I managed to finish the book, which came out last year. It's entitled She's a Boy, it's available on Amazon. Quick look. And it finally got an ending, which was the moment that I decided to go back to living the life that I should have been living all my life. But the problem is, this is still happening to children around the world. They're still being reassigned, they're still having cosmetic genital surgeries on perfectly healthy children, and it happens all the time, all over. Cloacal extrophy children, cloacal extrophy males in particular are still assigned female, in many places around the world, which is very unfair, as it is for everybody. You're asked to deal with a complex medical condition and live your life with it. And on top of that, they throw on confusion and gender dysphoria and all that on top of it. But they tell you that it's good for you. You can't live as a male without a penis, so therefore you have to be female. And thankfully, with organisations like UKIA and Intersex UK, who have taken on the fight to try and change things for intersex children who are born and who are often subjected to surgeries, sterilisations and medical procedures all throughout their lives that are horrendous and demeaning and as the UN said last year in one of their reports, torture and abuse. And progress is being made. Progress, though slow, is being made in terms of trying to push legislation through to government, trying to educate medical students, teachers, anyone that will listen as well, trying to get out in the media and actually allow people to have this information and be able to understand what intersex is, because it's been such a hidden entity for such a long time, mainly because of the shame that people feel around it. If they don't feel entirely male or entirely female, surely they think they're told that's shameful. It's not. You are who you are, and everybody, every child, every person has a right to their own body and their own body autonomy, their own natural progression, and that's very important. And yes, progress is being made around the world, definitely, but there's still a long way to go. Currently there's only one country in the world that's banned all types of cosmetic surgeries on intersex children, and that's Malta. And they're really a yardstick into which every country's government should be thinking, we have to do the same, because someone has to protect these children. Because until it's illegal, medical professionals will still carry on these surgeries. But they've said so themselves. But the important thing we've got to remember is that it's all about saving those children from harm. That's the most important thing, and it's what drives us all to do this. We've been harmed, we've been abused, and that's a driving factor. And we know we have to keep going because there are so many others out there that need protecting, and that's what's important. Thank you.
Hi, so I'd just like to say a few words about why I decided to run this event, because maybe you may be a bit confused, like an LGBT plus society, whether we should be doing more things on sexuality. So the reason I started this plus campaign was because there are many identities which are severely overlooked in the LGBT plus community, and one of those is intersex people, which are often relatively invisible, especially in the LGBT plus community. Lots of people neglect the I or the plus altogether. I actually, I think last academic year, saw Joe speak here at St Catherine's by a talk that was organised by Charlotte. And I think this was the first time that I had actually sort of been exposed to intersex issues, and it is really important and something which is horribly neglected. And as someone who has worked as a medical student. I study veterinary medicine, but for the first 3 years we study with